Wave is spreading across global social media. Fans from Europe, Africa, and the Middle East are announcing they're canceling their tickets.
Former FIFA president Sepp Blatter yesterday backed calls for fans to quote-unquote stay away from FIFA World Cup matches in the United States.
Tournament. This will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to showcase the greatness of America. And
Paul Hayward in The Observer says a World Cup boycott has to be a live threat all the way up to next June.
As immigration tensions escalate, the former president of FIFA is supporting a boycott of the upcoming 2026 World Cup.
States.
It is not safe to go to America, not only during the World Cup. Any South African who had an intention to go to America, this is not
the 2026 World Cup was supposed to feel like a global party on an almost ridiculous scale. 3 host countries for the first time, a bigger format, massive stadiums, and the United States welcoming the tournament back in a way we haven't seen in decades. The storyline on paper is simple. Soccer's biggest event lands in North America, and the whole world shows up. But online, a very different storyline has been building momentum. Across social media, you're seeing posts from fans in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East saying they're done with it. Some claim they're canceling tickets. Others say they won't even apply for visas. And what started as scattered frustration is now being discussed as something more organized, a boycott, or at least the threat of one. So how does a tournament designed to unite people end up wrapped in anxiety, suspicion, and backlash? A big part of the answer sits inside the wider political atmosphere in the United States right now, especially when it comes to immigration and border entry. Over the past few years, travel into the U.S. has felt harder for a lot of people, even those with clean records and genuine reasons to visit. Fans talk about stricter visa rules, longer processing times, and applications that feel like they demand more proof, more documents, and more patience than ever. For someone planning a once-in-a-lifetime trip, that alone can be enough to kill the excitement. Nobody wants to spend months preparing, pay huge travel costs, and still feel like they might be turned away at the last minute. But the fear people describe isn't only about paperwork. A lot of it is about the experience at the airport and the feeling of being treated like a suspect instead of a guest. Fans from parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia have been openly discussing worries about aggressive questioning, long secondary inspections, and, in the worst cases, temporary detention. Whether every individual story is verifiable or not, they spread fast because they match a broader fear people already carry. The belief that entry decisions can be unpredictable and that your dignity can be at the mercy of a single bad interaction. And in the internet era, perception doesn't wait for a formal investigation. One story can shape the mood of millions. A Nigerian fan says his visa was refused without a clear explanation. A family from Pakistan worries a small mistake could destroy their entire plan. Other travelers say they felt humiliated, singled out, or treated differently because of where they're from. Again, not every viral post can be confirmed, but the bigger point is this. Once enough people believe traveling is risky, the event itself becomes risky. That's the heart of the problem. The World Cup isn't only a sports event, it's a trust event. It's the planet agreeing, for 1 month, to play together. And if a large part of the planet feels unwelcome, even the best marketing campaign in the world can't fully cover that up. What makes this even more serious is that the anxiety isn't limited to random posts. The debate has started pulling in bigger voices, including political commentators, supporter groups, and people connected to the football world who understand what a World Cup needs to succeed. Instead of the usual build-up, the conversation is drifting toward warnings and think twice messaging. When someone associated with FIFA's past leadership starts publicly suggesting fans should be cautious about traveling, it sends a signal. Not necessarily that the tournament will collapse, but that the comfort level is changing. And once that shift begins, it's hard to reverse quickly. In parts of Europe, the discussion has moved from online noise to something that sounds more official. Some organized supporter groups have been asking whether football federations should issue travel guidance. Some politicians have raised the idea of formal advisories. And when that kind of talk enters the mainstream, it stops being just a fan argument. It becomes a national conversation about safety, fairness, and how citizens might be treated abroad. Human rights organizations have also weighed in, pointing to the obvious contradiction. A tournament marketed as global unity can't look like it's quietly filtering who gets to participate based on nationality, religion, or background. The World Cup's brand is built on the idea that everyone belongs. If the host environment looks like it clashes with that idea, then the tournament's image takes a hit, even if the matches still go ahead. Here's what's making it worse: the silence. FIFA hasn't taken a firm public stance about the boycott talk. Most national federations haven't either. Meanwhile, planning continues like nothing is happening. Venues are being prepared. Match schedules are rolling. Tickets are moving forward. On the surface, that sounds normal, but in the middle of a rising trust problem, silence creates a vacuum. And whenever there's a vacuum online, it gets filled with speculation, suspicion, and worst-case assumptions. At that point, the boycott threat becomes more than a hashtag. It becomes a practical question. What happens if a meaningful number of international fans decide they'd rather stay home? Because this isn't just about feelings, it's about economics, and the World Cup is an economic machine. Sponsors don't invest hundreds of millions because they love the sport in a pure, spiritual way. They invest for attention, stadium energy, packed fan zones, global footage, and the sense that the entire world is participating. Brands like Emirates, Visa, Adidas, and many others are paying for maximum impact. They want the visuals: full stands, singing crowds, endless viral moments. If international fans don't travel in big numbers, that atmosphere changes. And in a tournament this massive, even a small shift in small attendance patterns can ripple outward. Think about what host cities are counting on. It's not just ticket revenue. It's hotels filling up, restaurants running nonstop, transport companies booming, shops and local markets benefiting, temporary jobs being created. Cities like Dallas, Atlanta, and Miami aren't preparing for a modest tourist bump. They're preparing for a flood. If that flood slows down, the financial math changes quickly. There have been projections of roughly $5 billion in economic impact for the U.S. tied to the tournament. But projections depend on confidence. They depend on people actually arriving. When confidence weakens, those numbers don't just wobble, they can collapse in specific sectors: hotel occupancy, local tourism, event staffing, and the entire ecosystem built around the world is coming. And sponsors watch that closely, because if the tournament becomes politically messy, or if the fan experience becomes associated with fear and uncertainty, then sponsors start protecting their image. Even quietly shifting parts of their campaign focus can be a clue. If brands start emphasizing Canada and Mexico more in their activations, media buys, and fan events, it's not just marketing strategy. It's a signal that reputational risk is being redistributed. And that brings us to the most interesting twist in this whole story: the contrast between the three host countries. While the United States is dealing with a growing cloud of skepticism, Canada and Mexico are being talked about online in a completely different tone. Their cities are increasingly being framed as the safer bet, not in terms of crime, headlines, or stereotypes, but in terms of welcome, predictability, and how fans expect to be treated on arrival. Canada, in particular, is often described by traveling fans as more straightforward. Clearer processes, fewer surprises, and a general sense that you're a visitor, not a problem to be managed. Mexico, on the other hand, has something even more powerful for this specific tournament: deep football culture. For a lot of fans, Mexico feels like the place where the World Cup spirit naturally lives in the streets. The vibe matters. The feeling of being wanted matters. And right now, many fans say they'd rather plan their trip around matches in Mexico or Canada than gamble on a stressful entry experience in the US. Now here's where things get real. Even if the tournament still happens exactly as scheduled, perception can quietly move the center of gravity. If the best World Cup experience becomes associated with Toronto, Vancouver, Mexico City, or Guadalajara, then the United States risks hosting games without hosting the world in the way it expected. The stadiums may still be full for many matches, but the global emotional ownership of the tournament, the feeling of "we all went," could shift elsewhere.